Use the code CHICKEN in the shop.
Hey guys, the Chickens here. We are back today with another Boom Beach video. In today's video, guys, we're trying out something a little bit different. We're going to make a Boom Beach Warships tier list, and I think this is going to be a lot of fun. So I want to know from you guys, as I go through this, which ones you agree with, which ones you disagree with. Please let me know that down below in the comments, and then maybe we'll finalize it and make a community kind of tier list for all these tech tree nodes. So if you haven't already, I do appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel, and if you want to see more stuff like this, leave a like down below. So the way this is going to work is we have 6 tiers. So S, A, B, C, D, and E. So S is going to be the top, A the next best in descending order. Okay, so how the ranking is going to work. So I thought about this and how it would be possible because it's kind of subjective, which is the difficult thing. But there definitely are certain things you unlock in warships that are better than other things, right? So the way I'm going to do this is the nodes that it's going to be based on a tech node that is most impactful. So if we look at something like a machine gun, for instance, sure, it might have seasons where right out of the gates it's super strong at 3 ERs, and it's the best defense, and it's blah blah blah. Typically, for the most part, it's a defense that everybody picks up. It's good. You want to have them. They're not totally game changing. So something like that would be somewhere in the middle. Whereas, a stat node like building health, which is arguably one of the stronger stats in the entire thing, in all of warships, that would be ranked higher because it has more of an impact on the season. Typically, it's get to 7, get to that last building health at the end of the tech tree, and then, that impacts the season a lot more than unlocking, machine guns or a mine multi-node or something like that. And then there's nodes that are, key vacuums. They're totally useless. So I think it'll be interesting. We'll have, we'll be able to go through this and have some good discussion. So this will probably be part 1. I think that this will end up being a 2-part video. But let's just get started off here. So first off, we have Seekers. Now Seekers are kind of going to be a controversial one. I'm actually going to put them in A because they can be S, but it depends. So Seekers can be amazing. Seekers can dominate a warship season. The thing is, they're not always the best troop to use. There's sometimes where we get them and they're not the greatest troop. Typically, if we have them early on, they're extremely strong. And, every warship season, people will use Seekers and they will do well with them. I'm going to put them in A rather than S because I feel like it's not guaranteed every season they're going to get you ahead. Next up, we have the Cryo Bomb. The Cryo Bomb I'm actually going to put as an S tier node because the Cryo Bomb, and I think that's the reason that we don't see it in most seasons. We've seen it this season in season 50. It absolutely changes the whole season because once you get the Cryo Bomb, even in a super defensive meta, kind of like what we're seeing right now, when people get the Cryo Bomb, it unlocks so much ability to just let Seekers run free, to shut down defenses. We got 6 max damage and rocket launchers under Sky Shield. 2 Cryo Bombs kind of nullifies that. So I think for that reason, in terms of the sheer impact and how good the Cryo Bomb is, how the value you get out of using them for the cost of GBE, it's got to be an S tier node. Next up, we have Heavy Choppers. So Heavy Choppers I'm also going to put as S tier because they are, typically the final meta. Whether you're using Seekers, Bombardiers, Rocket Choppers, what's in front of them? Heavy Choppers, each and every single time. Actually, you know what? I'm going to change that. I'm going to put them down to A because Heavy Choppers by themselves, they're good, but they need heavies. They need some other stuff, even as we talk about it. They need other troops. Just them by themselves, one of the best nodes that you can unlock in warships, not necessarily going to get it done. As I saw this season, I unlocked Heavy Choppers, didn't have heavies, didn't have a lot of stuff to use them, and I was going downhill. So I think for that reason, again, it's kind of like Seekers. You get them at the right time, at the right place, with the right stuff. Look out. But by themselves, not amazing. Next up, we have Shock Launchers. This one's kind of tough. This is going to be our first defense as well. I would put Shock Launchers in A tier because they are, arguably the strongest defense in warships, if not one of the strongest, definitely a top 2 or 3. And they have a lot of impact. They can really change the attacking meta. Whether we're using heavy rush and we have them early, shock launchers can absolutely shut that down. Or seekers late, shock launchers will slow them down. They'll slow down heavy choppers. And again, just as a reference point this season, because it's fresh in everybody's mind, getting shock launchers is going to be a huge push point for a lot of people. Next up, we've got the Mechs. Now, the Mechs are an interesting one because they can be good, but for the most part, they're pretty much just a straight-up vacuum node. But there are times where Mechs are part of the meta. It's rare, but it does happen. So I'm actually going to put them as a C because I think before they had their stun ability, I would probably put them down in D. And for the most part, they are a vacuum. But since they do have those times, there is that moment where the sun shines down on those Mechs, and they are kind of useful. I think for that reason, I'm going to put them in kind of the middle of the road. Usually bad, but sometimes they can have their place, especially if we're using bombardiers or something like that. They're tough to use with other troops, but sometimes they can get the job done. All right, so next up, we've got Sergeant Brick. Now, Brick is a tricky one because, again, she can be good sometimes and she can be bad some other times. I would certainly say that she's better than Mechs overall. So I'm going to put her in the B node. Yeah, I think for a lot of what Brick does, she's usually really strong early on. Typically, we don't see Brick later on in the season because of Kavan, and he kind of takes over. It's either Kavan or Bullet usually later on. Brick, I would put down as, like a primary hero to prevent fizzling with Iron Will, or sometimes you could do some crazy cluster grenade hits with her. But yeah, I would put her, actually, I'm going to put her down in C. I think, she does have a lot of abilities and stuff, but just simply, there's usually better options, and actually, I would change my mind. I'm going to go back with B, because Iron Will sometimes does really open things up, so again, it's a tricky list. You guys let me know what you think. Am I way off, or are we right on the money? So next up, we've got the good doctor, Dr. Kavan. I think Kavan is a pretty safe lock for A tier. He's just so good. He makes pretty well every attack better. His second wind is typically the strongest hero ability in all of the game across warships and, even trickling into the main game. We're talking more about warships here, but I would put Kavan in the A tier because I think he is overall the best hero in warships. All right, so next up we got the Medkit node. Now, the Medkit node, I'm going to put way down in D. Some seasons I don't even unlock it, It can be helpful for sure. I mean, it's a medkit. Sometimes, there's these fizzly metas where medkits make a difference, but I'd say for the most part, the medkits are, they're definitely one of the better key vacuums for sure. Like if you're going to be forced to open a key vacuum, I think it should be something like medics or medkits where, it's potentially going to help in every attack and you get the choice of using it or not. Next up, we've got Bullet, and Bullet is going to go into the A tier. And you see there is a bit of a difference between A and S, what I'm trying to do. I'm going to make you a little bit smaller. So yeah, Bullet is, I feel like he's a good spot for A tier because he's not, totally game-changing by himself. Sometimes he can be. But he needs other stuff with him. He needs to be in the right meta. He needs to be usually with Seekers or Rocket Choppers. So he's very good. Definitely on par with Kavan. I might put Kavan up just a touch a little bit higher than Bullet. But very, very strong hero. Definitely deserves to be A tier in my opinion. Now, Rocket Choppers. Rocket Choppers I'm going to put in the B tier. Now, don't get mad at me, Rocket Chopper players. The reason is they're not always good. Typically, Rocket Choppers are either super hot or they're super not. And, those moments when they shine, they shine brightly and they are amazing. And, they take a lot of skill to use properly. You got to really be able to predict them. You need more tools to use them. They're not one of those things you can just unlock and go. Like if you don't have shocks, they're tough. You don't have flares, you can't really use them. Much better with Bullet than any other hero. The other heroes don't really work with them except maybe Everspark. Definitely, can be a push point for sure, but it just depends. Oh, now we got Bombardiers next. So, I don't know. This one's tough because although bombers are basically the same as rocket choppers for everything I just said, I'm actually going to put them as A tier because typically bombers, at least for the last like 15 seasons or so, they've been the final meta. Each and every season. At the end of the tech tree, what is winning? Bombardiers. Every single time. And, you know, they're a troop that can get you out of the fizzle meta. So I think overall, like if I'm going to unlock one troop and, you know, I have no idea without any context for other stuff that I'm unlocking, I think I'd rather have bombardiers than rocket chopper players. Trying not to be biased because I am a bomber player over a rocket player. But I think overall they would need to go up a little bit higher than the RCs. But it's, you know, it's subjective. Yeah. So next up we've got riflemen. Now riflemen are, I think, a good spot for B because they're a good middle of the road troop. Now the thing with riflemen is they're going to shine with Kavan because they're going to be able to max out his second wind. He can bring out extra riflemen, which usually does help quite a lot. Not really a troop that you can use on its own or, you know, is going to have a ton of impact, but they're definitely a troop that has surprised me in Warships and just their ability to be used. Scooch over here a little bit. They work well with a lot of different combinations. They work well early season with Zukas. They work well late season with Bombardiers. They work well, you know, mid-season with Rocket Choppers. They've got a lot of uses. And although they don't really dominate by themselves, I think that they're just a really good, maybe not a great troop, but definitely a really good one for sure. Heavy's kind of the same. So we got heavies next. And heavies I'm going to put as B tier because... Actually, you know what? I think heavies have to go A tier just simply for the fact of heavy rushing. Because sometimes they are the most dominant troop. Typically, it prevents people from totally fizzling. We use them later on in, you know, whatever sort of heavy chopper meta. Typically, we unlock heavies every season and we max them every season. One of those things we kind of just forget about or maybe don't appreciate because we're so used to using them all the time. But I think just in terms of, you know, if we're doing this list based on impact on the season, to have heavies versus not having heavies, I think I'm going to go with heavies every time. Crying ears. So crying ears are typically very, very bad. I mean, I'm going to put them in D because, again, they do have some use, but for the most part, you know, 90% of the time, they're just simply a key vacuum. So, yeah, that's a tough one. So let's do a couple more here. So sniper towers. Sniper towers are a difficult thing to rank because, I mean, you know, they're okay, but I don't know. I feel like you could go pretty far without having them. The only times they really come in handy is early on in the season when either A, we don't have a lot of buildings and they need to slow down bombardiers, or B, there's rocket choppers out on the field, or C, you just need to unlock them to move forward and you get an extra building. I think they're more helpful than cryos and medkits for the most part, so I'm going to leave them right there. So next up, we've got the Scorcher. The Scorcher's a tricky one. You know, we do use them sometimes. I think I would put them down here in C because, especially after this season where, you know, we did get some value out of the Scorchers. Were they the best troop really at any given point? Not really. And for the most point, they are a bit of a vacuum, and we don't typically use them. You know, if we have the choice of Scorchers over heavy choppers, like, why would you ever choose a Scorcher? It's just kind of a, you know, it's kind of a second-class troop, and I don't know. You know what? I think I'm going to change where I put Mechs. I'm going to put Mechs back down here. Because Scorchers are, you know, better than Mechs for the most part, I would say, depending on... It's tough. So I think Scorchers are a bit better than Mechs because I forget if they have more HP, but they're a little bit faster, so they're easier to get out in front of your troops. Mechs kind of just stand on top of each other and die. And I mean, they do enough damage where sometimes you can use all Scorchers. You can never really use all Mechs and succeed. So, I don't know, I think Scorchers have a little bit more ability than Mechs, and Mechs are, you know... It's a battle of the key vacuums. Which one is, you know, do we need at the moment? Whoops. I wanted to do chicken. Let's click this guy. So next up we got shock bombs. Shock bombs I'm going to put as an A tier ability. Shock bombs make a lot of stuff more viable, a lot of stuff stronger, a lot of stuff you need shock bombs to have. Typically every season, that's how we kind of get out of the fizzle meta is by getting shock bombs. So in terms of their impact, they have I would say they have a very significant impact on the warship season. So for that reason, I'm going to put them into the A tier. I'm just going to try to make these a little bit smaller. The A tier is filling up pretty quick, but yeah, I don't know of an attack strategy really that doesn't benefit from having shock bombs. So in terms of impact, I think they're right up there. Artillery. I'm going to put artillery in B. Very good. Not always worth getting. I think for what it costs, usually, it's a very expensive unlock. And I think there's specific seasons where you got to have the barrage, you got to have the artillery. But I think for the most part, it's kind of a 50-50 thing. Like, typically I'll get barrage and artillery at the very end of the season, and it's always something that helps you for sure, but it's not necessarily something you have to go out of your way for, especially if barrage is on the main path like we've seen this season. So it can have a lot of impact. It kind of depends on the season. Sometimes everyone remembers that 2 engine room meta way back when it was like the 2-second, who can throw their artilleries faster. So, I mean, they can have a lot of impact for sure. Sometimes we skip them. For that reason, I'm going to put them as good, not very good, or the best. I'm going to do the same with shock mines. I'm going to put them in the B tier. Just because they can be, they can be very good, a good deterrent to stop seekers and slow them down, and it's a very strong defense for sure. Adding shock mines, shock mines will typically slow down any sort of attack time that isn't just simply using rocket choppers. So they definitely have times where it's like that's the push point is get to shock mines, and then you can stop this, and then you can go. Typically, if they're early on in the season, we'll see that a little bit, but. Yeah, I would say very good defense, kind of on the teeter of A and B. Next up, we've got our first stat node. If I can click on it, we've got DBD. Now, in terms of stat nodes are typically the best to always get in warships. I would say DBD is probably the worst of the 4 stat nodes, the least impactful, anyways. There's sometimes you'll unlock it, and just based on what we have on offense, it might not be helpful at all. It's always going to be beneficial, but sometimes in the moment, it's not really a big push point. And I do think it's the worst out of the 4 stat nodes, but it's a stat node, so it's got to be A at least. I don't think you can put a stat node underneath A. Next up, we've got smokes. Now, smokes are a tough one because they can be great with seekers. They can be great with heavy rush. They can be great with rocket choppers. A lot of the times we don't really end up using it if we're not doing specific attacks. So I'm going to put smoke down in C. I just don't see it, always having a huge impact on the season. More often than not, we're never like, okay, you got to get to smoke, and then that's going to make a big difference, other than, if we're doing some of those things that we were just talking about. So we're almost at 20 minutes, so I'm going to wrap up. This is going to be part 1 of a 2-part series of ranking everything in warships, going over this tier list. And I want to hear from you guys. And maybe we can change stuff around, like I said at the beginning of the video, and make it into a kind of formal, like, finalized tier list thing, and then, we can argue about it forever after that. So, yeah, want to try something new today? Let me know what you guys think. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like down below. As always, thanks so much for watching. That is going to wrap up the video today. Make sure to leave a like if you found it interesting, entertaining, or informative. Catch you next one, guys. Check it out. Back.